Hello, friends. We are back for our eighth session of the Gleanings of the Writings from Baha'u'llah. Um, sorry. So, with that, Peter, would you take over?
Sure. Sure. Thank you, Jeremiah, for making this all possible. So, my friends, I've been asked by a couple of people who have taken the time to write me emails to slow down a little bit. Apparently, I've been going a little bit too fast. So, I'm going to try to do that. But also, I want to make sure that we go through all of the texts. And of course, this is not a substitute to reading because we're not going to read through the entire text of the selections that have been chosen for this part 8. And we're also not going to read through all of my notes in their entirety because sometimes they go on and on. They're really for reading in between our Zoom sessions. So here you have, I'm going to click on the bottom here, and I'm going to review the basic themes, the principal themes in the 7 excerpts from the Writings of Baha'u'llah that are collected here in the 8th class. And the first of those themes is the purpose of the creation of the human being, about the messengers of God, the day of God, and the revelations of the Bab and Baha'u'llah. And that is one of the most succinct summaries of the most important Baha'i teachings just in one place. It's really phenomenal text that I think I'm going to print it out and put it, someplace in my house so that I've got it right there to remind me of Baha'u'llah's specific words in describing the religion of God and the day of God in which we live. The second theme is the creation of man and the creation of all things. The third theme is the existence of man after physical death and the soul after physical death, which are related themes. And then the nature of the soul. And the nature of the soul, of course, is also a related theme. So those are the basic themes that are going to be covered in this selection. And the first excerpt, which is 76, LXXVI 76, is a tablet that was originally revealed for a believer named Ahmad Kuli Khan in Arabic, and it provides summaries of various specific Baha'i teachings, and they are done in this very succinct manner, very sparse in their use of terminology, which is extremely helpful for those of us who want to memorize passages or want to share passages with our friends and our family and so forth. Here we have something that actually puts it in this very concentrated statement. And I wanted to point out that the first paragraph is speaking about what Baha'u'llah calls in the Kitab Aqdas the changeless faith of God, eternal in the past, eternal in the future. Because what Baha'u'llah makes very clear in his writings, including many of the excerpts in Gleanings, is that the real religion is not a human phenomenon. We don't invent it. We don't create it. It doesn't come from us. It comes from God, and it comes through the messengers of God, and it's one religion. They're not like 50,000 religions out there. In reality, there's one religion, and then human beings have confused things. And so we ended up with all these different paths, which are full of contradictions and inaccuracies. This is one of the major jobs that Baha'is have from Baha'u'llah, which is to remind people of what are the authentic original teachings of God throughout all the ages. So that's what the summary of this selection, and we're going to look at subsequent paragraphs here. Here in the second paragraph here, he's talking about a principle that's found in all of the religion of God. You see it in Judaism and Christianity and Islam and all of the religions. And that is that not everybody becomes a believer. There's a choice that needs to be made, and the choice is ours to make. And the choice has consequences. If we choose to embrace the faith from God, it has great blessings for us. And if we choose not to, then a lot of problems arise. And this is why he says in some tablets that he wrote in Persian, the Tabernacle of Unity is, by the way, is a wonderful collection of originally all Persian tablets of Baha'u'llah. And there is where the original texts are found that talk about the divine physician, comparing the manifestation of God to a physician who is giving the remedy that we need at the time he appears. And Baha'u'llah says that all the other remedies that are being provided to us are not going to cure our ills. They're not going to help us out. We need to take the one that God gives us. This paragraph that you can see in front of me is talking about the revelation of the Bab and of Baha'u'llah. And it's also talking about the fact that there are some people who accept it and there's some people who turn away from it. And it also talks about, when it says the Lord of Days, it's talking about something that we have found in previous excerpts, which is that when we speak of the day of God, it refers to two things. One is the coming of each manifestation. Each dispensation begins as the day of God. When the manifestation is alive, living on earth, that is a very special time. The second major meaning is that the day of God is the day in which the cycle of spiritual development changes. And we have begun with the Bab and Baha'u'llah, we have begun the cycle of fulfillment, which Baha'u'llah also calls the coming of age of humanity. That means that for the next 500,000 years, we're going to be in a different cycle than we were previously. It's a cycle in which all of the dreams and prophecies and hopes that our ancestors had are going to be fulfilled. That's the promise. And they're starting to be fulfilled right now. The next passage here that you have in pink is a quotation from the Bab, but I don't know where it's found. So I'm just telling you, I haven't found that particular text, but it's not really important. What's important is what he's saying in that one. And he's saying how important it is to recognize the revelation of God. It's wonderful how succinct the Bab is here. What would it profit man if he were to fail to recognize the revelation of God? Nothing, whatever. It's like really straightforward. In the next sentence, he talks about of course, the martyrdom of the Bab. And then here it talks about the people who accepted the Bab and Baha'u'llah. Again, so this is kind of a reiteration of history, of divine history, of what's been going on that's really the most important, which is this revelation from the two manifestations of God. Of course, the specific language that Baha'u'llah uses is language which is very, very familiar to people who have read the Old Testament, the New Testament, and the Quran, because much of the same language is used over and over again. For example, it says, after the lapse of a few years, the heaven of divine decree was cleft asunder. That specific wording is used in the Old Testament, New Testament, and in the Quran. And then it's the beauty of the Bab appeared in the clouds of the names of God. Again, the same thing, this idea of that the manifestation appears in the clouds. And this is explained, this symbolic language is explained beautifully and clearly by Baha'u'llah in the Kitab-i-Yagan. This is why the Guardian said the Kitab-i-Yagan is the most important book for us to master, because it's going to give us an explanation of virtually every one of the most important Baha'i teachings and the teachings of religion. It's a textbook for understanding progressive revelation. Again, this is a lot of it is mixing in history, and it's explaining things that happen. And the punchline really here is actually very important for us to realize, is that sometimes people have looked back at history and they've been very sad because they said, well, humanity missed out, and it's a tragedy that people did not accept the manifestation, and that they suffered so much. But Baha'u'llah makes it clear in many of these passages that this was all designed by God. This is how God does things. He gives us the choice. So it's not a tragedy, it's simply a choice. And the choice comes with consequences. They're not pleasant consequences if we don't do the right thing, because otherwise, how would we ever learn how to do the right thing? That's why Baha'u'llah says the law of creation is reward and punishment. That's the foundation. And also, this is really important too. You will find a number of passages where Baha'u'llah talks about his sufferings. And Baha'u'llah explains here that the reason why he tells us about his sufferings is so that we don't feel that we're alone in our sufferings, and so that he can tell us what his sufferings mean to him. And he says very clearly, my sufferings cannot hurt me. All of these awful things that people have done to me can't hurt me, because these are the trials that God has sent my way. And this I accept fully. It says there's only one thing that really hurts me, and that is when my followers do not follow me, when they do not follow my teachings. That is what he says over and over again. So I'm going to go to the next one, which is 67. This is about creation. This is such a fascinating topic. You can also see this discussed by Abdu'l-Baha in some answered questions and in some of his tablets. Baha'u'llah makes the statement that human beings were created by God with a specific nature, and each one of us has a specific capacity The way he puts it here is, unto each one hath been prescribed a preordained measure. That means decided in advance. He gave each one of those, each one of us, special nature. And then he says, all that which ye potentially possess can, however, be manifested only as a result of your own volition. Volition is a very simple word. It means you've got to do it. You've got to not just want to do it, but actually do it. It's up to us to actualize our potentials. This is one of the fundamental teachings of Baha'u'llah, because he is teaching us as adults. This is the coming age of humanity. That means he's treating us not like babies that need to be told what to do all the time, not like people who need priests and other religious scholars and so forth to teach us how to think. No, this is our job. We're grown-ups now, so we need to take this very seriously. And then he says, but it's not only, it's a blessing, but it's also a huge responsibility, because if we do not do our best to manifest as a result of our own volition, if we do not develop the gifts of God that he has given us, then that falls back on us. We're the ones who are going to suffer, not him. All right, then we have 78. And this talks about the origin of creation. Now, those of you who are familiar with the scriptures of different religions know that basically all religions have some sort of an account of how the creation happened, how everything came into existence. And sort of like scientists have this theory that there was a Big Bang, and that's where everything came from, was the Big Bang. Well, Baha'u'llah makes a very interesting statement, and that is that God's creation hath existed from eternity and will continue to exist forever. Its beginning hath had no beginning, and its end knoweth no end. So this is really a very radical teaching that on the surface would seem to conflict with the teaching of all these other religions, but that's not so, because he goes on in the subsequent paragraphs to explain what it means when the prophets of old, he says it right here, when they make statements like, in the beginning was God and there was no creature to know him. The Lord was alone and no one to adore him. God was alone, there was none else besides him. He will always remain what he hath ever been. He explains what these mean in a way that's so brilliant and so unexpected and so challenging to a literal frame of mind. See, we live in a time now where there's this huge fight. Well, there's been a fight for 150 years between the people who are saying that everything is created by itself. It sort of came into existence by itself. And people were saying, no, all things were created at one time, and they were created by God. And Baha'u'llah tells us that the truth is actually something different from either of those extremes, because everything is created by God, but God is the creator always. So all things are coming into existence. There's no beginning and no end. It's a continuum. Then the next section here, which is the 79th, Baha'u'llah By the way, these are all questions that were asked by a believer. And let me see if I can find out. Let me see where he talks about who the believer. Yes, the believer was named Abdul Razak. That means the servant of Razak. And this is a tablet that was written in Persian, and there are excerpts. There's several really interesting excerpts from this tablet to Abdul Razak in Gleanings, because this man asked many questions, and Baha'u'llah was extremely generous with answering questions of people. So let me see. Now we go down here. Another question that he asked was about the worlds of God. I might be wrong about this. Let me check. I want to make sure that you're not getting. Oh no, I'm wrong. This is actually from a tablet to another person, who is named Muhammad Hosseini Ishirazi, who is called Wafa, meaning faithful, and he was another beloved believer, and he also asked lots of questions. So remember the Baha'i month of questions, Masa'id, it's called. Questions are really important in this religion because if we ask questions, we get answers. We don't ask questions, we often don't get answers. In fact, there's somebody asked the Guardian, what was the knowledge that removes all fear, which is mentioned by Baha'u'llah in the Epistle to the Son of the Wolf? And the Guardian replied, nobody asked him, so we don't know. Well, so we got to really thank these guys that asked lots of questions, because we got answers. Another example of that is that you may be familiar with is after you read the entire Kitab-i-Aqdas, there's a whole section of the book which is called Questions and Answers. And those are questions that were asked of Baha'u'llah by one of his followers who was a particularly good scribe. He was excellent at taking down dictation and making sure that every single word was properly spelled. So his copies of the tablets of Baha'u'llah are regarded as the most accurate. And we have that from Baha'u'llah and Abdul Baha. And so the Universal House of Justice, when they have a copy that is done by Zainul Abidin is his name, when we have a copy by him, then we know that it's really accurate. Well, all of those questions that are found in this section after the Kitab-i-Aqdas, where he wanted to know what did Baha'u'llah have to say about a whole lot of issues, over 100. And we have his answers. So back to this. So here he's talking about the worlds of God. They're infinite worlds of God. The worlds of God are not just made up of heaven and earth. That was the old way of talking about there being this physical realm, and also there's another realm beyond it, which is spiritual. But Baha'u'llah is telling us that the worlds of God are infinite in their range and countless in their number. None can reckon or comprehend them except God. And then he gives us an example. And this is a wonderful demonstration of how Baha'u'llah is always trying to help us to understand the mysteries that we're going to experience ourselves. We're going to go and experience the worlds of God. And what does he say? He says, consider your state when you're asleep. And he describes what happens in sleep and how this is a sign of what it's like to be in another world, because we go there every night when we go to sleep. And this passage, you may have seen a similar passage in the Seven Valleys, where it also, talks about the dream. And I think there's a wonderful book, I've forgotten who put it together, but a book which is recording a lot of the dreams that were interpreted by Baha'u'llah and Abdu'l-Baha. So if you don't know about that book and that would interest you, shoot me an email and I'd be glad to look it up for you and give you the link. So now we've, as you can see here, this text is in 2 allotments because it didn't fit in one. There's a limit to how many characters you can put in each one of these boxes, you see. So now we're going to go to the next one. And see how to do that? You just click on that arrow and then you scroll down and here you go. So this is going to be 80. And by the way, we're at this point about halfway through Gleanings. This is our 8th session. We're going to do 17 sessions. And this is number 80, and there are a total of 166. So in this passage 80, let's see if this is another excerpt from a tablet to Abdul Razak. And it's mostly about the life of the soul after the body dies. Remember I told you he asked lots of questions. He'll ask me whether man is apart from the prophets of God and his chosen ones will retain after his physical death the self-same individuality, personality, consciousness, and understanding that characterize his life in this world. Now, this is a question that every human being asks at some point. Am I going to continue to be me when I cross over to the next world? And this is so interesting that Baha'u'llah answers it. So we don't have to guess. We don't have to go and look for all sorts of made up answers because Baha'u'llah actually knows. Because he knows about all kinds of things that only people who have his prophetic consciousness, his greater consciousness, can actually know for themselves. The only other people that know what happens after death are the people who are in the next world, and they're not talking to us. I mean, sometimes you think they're talking to you, and maybe they do say a few things, but the gold standard for actually knowing what's in the next world, in all of those worlds of God that Baha'u'llah speaks of, is to look at what he says. And this is all a question. First part here is all a question. Isn't that interesting? And here he gives the answer. Know thou that the soul of man is exalted above and is independent of all infirmities of body or mind. And then he says, when it leaveth the body, however, it will evince such ascendancy and reveal such influence as no force on earth can equal. What? This is just mind-blowing when you think about it. Every single one of us is going to have this power, this source, this energy that is beyond anything on earth when we go to the next world. And yet human beings have been perennially scared of what's going to happen. I'm going to die and I'm going to disappear. I won't be able to see people I love. And, I won't be able to have hamburgers anymore. We have a million things that we were upset about. But here Baha'u'llah gives us this absolute statement of encouragement to tell us, no, the next world is going to be infinitely better than the world you're living in. This is just the beginning of your existence. This is where you learn the lessons that you have to learn in this world. Then you're going to go to another world, and it's going to be much, much better. His words here: every pure, every refined and sanctified soul will be endowed with tremendous power and shall rejoice with exceeding gladness. Now, the reason why this has got a note attached to it, and that's why it's highlighted, is because I cited a tablet that is the penultimate, it's the next to last tablet in Gleanings, where he talks about what's going to happen upon the death of the body. And that passage, I just put it in there so that you could look at them and compare the two of them and not have to wait until 165. And this is very beautiful passage where he's talking about the light of the soul. The soul of man should be likened unto this sun, and all the things on earth should be regarded as his body. And here in this note, I cited two passages actually. No, there are more. There are a few passages from the Gospels where Jesus is talking about the light, and he's talking about the same thing. He's talking about the light of the soul, which is illumined, which is turned on, which is empowered to exist by the manifestation. People don't just become the light of the world by themselves. It's through contact with Jesus and the Holy Spirit that they are transformed. That's why he says you have to be born again. And we are born again. We're born again in the faith, in having made a connection with the manifestation. And then he becomes our light. And then we discover our own light. Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. They're beautiful quotations. And by the way, if you can look at these quotations from the Bible and correlate them with the words of Baha'u'llah, you're going to have something to talk over with your Christian friends that's really going to surprise them. Because very often Christians tend to think that they're the only ones who think that particular way. It's very important for them to understand that the universe is much bigger than they think it is. And then there's a really interesting passage here where Baha'u'llah is talking about the potentialities that we have within us, and that we shouldn't expect that all of them are going to come into existence in this world, because they don't. In reality, what happens is we begin our spiritual development in this world, then we go to the next world, and that's where we really shine. And this is how he talks about it. He says, certain fruits indeed attain their fullest development only after being severed from the tree. So that's when we're severed from the tree in the sense of we lose our physical body. And then remember, let's see who asked this question. Let me see. Now we're going back to the Loy Abdul Wahab, which is this other guy who asked lots of questions of Baha'u'llah. And so he's giving detail now on the soul and its survival after death, which of course is a similar statement to what he's made in the previous passage, because he's talking about our existence after death. but he's using slightly different terminology. And he tells us more things about what's going to happen. And he also describes the challenge that we have, that we're prepared for death. You know, the Christians have, the Roman Catholics especially, have this really beautiful ritual where the priest comes and he reads you the last rites. And that's to make sure that when you enter the next world, you're entering in the right frame of mind, so you're ready for what's going to happen. It's really different. It's where everything that pertains to your physical body is completely irrelevant. And now all that matters is your spirit. All that matters is your soul. And Baha'u'llah does this, speaks of this also, except that it's not the responsibility of a priest to do last rites now. It is the responsibility of each one of us to reach out to God every day, because any day we could die. Anybody who's had members of their family die knows it so rarely happens when you think it does, when you think it's going to. It happens when he's ready and when your soul's ready. And in many cases, Baha'u'llah tells us that there are mysteries that he can't explain, that we're not ready to understand. Like right here, he says, the honor with which the hand of mercy will invest the soul is such as no tongue can adequately reveal, nor any other earthly agency describe. But nevertheless, here's the words of wisdom. Blessed is the soul which at the hour of its separation from the body is sanctified from the vain imaginings of the peoples of the world. You've got to let go, because you're going someplace. And if you really let go, then you can embrace that new experience with joy. Now, for those people who are interested in philosophy and comparative religion, these tablets in Gleanings are so full of ideas and turns of phrase that really help you to build bridges between the both philosophy and theology and scripture. A lot of those things that have been a source of confusion for people in the past are now explained by Baha'u'llah in such a wonderful way that we don't have to doubt anymore. Here's something that he assures us of. He says, the majority of the truly wise and learned have, throughout the ages, as it hath been recorded by the pen of glory and the tablet of wisdom. Now, the tablet of wisdom, my friends, is called the Loy Hikmat. It is one of the tablets that was revealed after the Kitab-i Aqdas, and it's in that collection of tablets written at that time that's called the Tablets of Baha'u'llah. If you go into the Baha'i reference library that the World Center has provided us, and you look at the list of the tablets of Baha'u'llah, the writings of Baha'u'llah, at the very bottom you will see the tablets of Baha'u'llah, and it's one of those, the Tablet of Wisdom. So he says, the majority of the truly wise and learned have throughout the ages, as it hath been recorded by the pen of glory and the tablet of wisdom, borne witness to the truth of that which the holy writ of God hath revealed. Well, that's a surprise. But he's talking about the truly wise and learned. He doesn't say all the wise and learned, because a lot of the wise and learned have all sorts of mistaken notions about what things are real and what things are unreal. But he's so generous, because if you even understand a little bit of the truth, that needs to be recognized, that needs to be praised. because it's that little bit of truth that could lead you to the greater truth that is what actually is going to benefit you in the next world. And he even says here, he says, even the materialists have testified in their writings to the wisdom of these divinely appointed messengers and have regarded the references made by the prophets to paradise, to hellfire, to future reward and punishment, to have been actuated by a desire to educate and uplift the souls of men. I'll now go to 82, and this is about what is the nature of the soul. And this is a tablet that Baha'u'llah, wrote and addressed to his second son chronologically. The second son was Mirza Muhammad Ali. He was the first son of Baha'u'llah with his second wife, Fatima. He was called Ghuzni Akbar, and he was appointed to be the second one after Abdul Baha in the Kitab-i-Ad of Baha'u'llah. Kitab-i-Ad is his Book of the Covenant that he wrote just before he died. And there's more than one tablet in Gleanings that was originally addressed to Muhammad Ali. There's a backstory to that. When Muhammad Ali was very young, he took certain verses of Baha'u'llah and misunderstood from reading them that he could reveal verses, that he was going to be able to be a conduit for the revelation of God. And he even had a group of followers. And when it came to Baha'u'llah's attention that this was happening, of course, he brought in his son and he said, "You're wrong about that. There's only one manifestation of God for the next 1,000 years. And anybody who claims to be a manifestation of God apart from me is not speaking the truth, is making it up." So if you know the sad story of Muhammad Ali, he never fully accepted that he was just going to be a follower. He wanted to be a leader. And when Abdul Baha was appointed to be the head of the cause and head of the community, then Mirza Muhammad Ali was very upset about that. And he basically misled the entire family of Baha'u'llah to follow him instead of follow Abdul Baha. They did not do it openly. They did it clandestinely, but they almost got Abdul Baha killed because of the terrible things that they claimed to the Ottoman imperial powers. Because at that time, Palestine or Israel, that area was governed by the Ottoman Empire. And so they had all kinds of lies about Abdul Baha, saying that he was trying to create a revolt against the Ottoman Empire, and almost got him killed. In fact, Abdul Baha thought he might get killed, and that's why he wrote the Will and Testament, literally 16, 17 years before he died. Most people write their Will and Testament just before they go. But he did that many years before, because at that particular time, it looked very likely that he was going to get arrested and either sent into exile or maybe executed. So the good thing that happened with Mirza Muhammad Ali was because he asked some good questions. And so we're going to get to read the tablets revealed by Baha'u'llah and learn something from them. One of the really fascinated, again, there's another passage to dreams here and how that's an indication of the multiple worlds of God. Probably one of the most important statements that you can find in Baha'u'llah's writings in this particular tablet is the following. Much hath been written in the books of old concerning the various stages of the development of the soul, such as concupiscence, irascibility, inspiration, benevolence, contentment, divine good pleasure, and the like. The pen of the Most High, however, is disinclined to dwell upon them. Every soul that walketh humbly with its God in this day, and cleaveth unto him, shall find itself invested with the honor and glory of all goodly names and stations. This is a very important passage for us to recall when we read the 7 valleys, the 4 valleys, the gems of divine mysteries, and so forth, and other treatises in which Baha'u'llah talks about stages of spiritual development that were believed in by the Muslims in Iran, chiefly at that time. This was his way of communicating with them, was to talk about those stages. This is a very important passage because it tells us the truth. It tells us that those stages, the description of all these stages and so forth, is not really essential. What's essential is that we understand is every soul who walketh humbly with its God in this day and cleaveth unto him, that means holds on to him and does his word, follows what his teachings are, shall be invested with the honor and glory of all goodly names and stations. That's all that's required of us. Just like it says in the very beginning of the Kitab-i-Aqdas, once you recognize the manifestation, your only obligation is to follow his teachings. That's it. Because if you don't follow his teachings, then his remedy for humanity, including for yourself, is not applied. It's not implemented. And that's what he came for, is to teach us how to take care of ourselves. Again, you will find this in this. This is in 82. If you want to go and find this again, this to me is like one of the really important passages to be reminded of. Certainly has been important for me. There he's describing the human soul and the state of the soul after the separation of the body. These are very similar themes to what we've seen in the previous tablets. These passages here were put together for a reason, and that is because the guardian arranged them so that they would be back to back. They're not exactly the same. It's not like a compilation that leaves out all of the other texts that Baha'u'llah talked about in the same tablet. We're getting much more than just a snapshot on one subject. And the guardian does that for a reason too, because he understands that the soul doesn't just respond to look at one truth at a time. We need to see that truth in the context of other truths. We need to see the connections, and those connections become clear when you have the whole passage, when you have big passages of a tablet, and you can look at how he responds not just to one question, but to another question that's related. And it's very often when we see those things side by side or one after the other that our consciousness really comes to understand what he's talking about. Here's another passage where he talks about how simple it is. So simple. Know thou of a truth that if the soul of man hath walked in the ways of God, that means obedient to the teachings of God, teachings of the manifestation, it will assuredly return and be gathered to the glory of the beloved. Now, let's see. This is talking about the dream again, because the importance of this idea that there are multiple worlds. And again, remember, he's addressing these remarks to different people. So he's passing on these teachings to multiple people and using sometimes similar language, sometimes quite different language based upon their capacity. Because remember, he's already told us each one of us has got a different capacity. And that's why so often one person will read a particular verse or a particular tablet or a particular book, and they get something out of it that somebody else doesn't get at all. And it's not that the other person's stupid. It's just they're different. We have different aptitudes. And it's also has to do with our own spiritual development. I first read Gleanings when I was 19. I didn't understand anything. I'm telling you really honestly, I didn't understand a word of it. It just went right over my head. I felt like I was inebriated, as if I was like, on a drug induced metaphysical journey, but I couldn't understand it. It's taken a long time to understand. Baha'u'llah is going to speak his language. He's not going to change his language. That's the way he talks. So get to know his language, and then it will become familiar. Once it's familiar, you're going to understand him a lot more at the time. Here's an example of how he weaves different themes into the same tablet. Okay? He says, as to thy question whether the physical world is subject to any limitations, know thou that the comprehension of this matter dependeth upon the observer himself. Depends on us. In one sense, it is limited. In another, it is exalted beyond all limitations. So important for us to see that when somebody sees something a different way, that's not a threat. That's not a cause for alarm. It's a cause for celebration. Because if we are understanding and tolerant and appreciative of the differences of other people, they will be much more likely to be tolerant and appreciative of our differences from them. So it's really this process of learning how to relate to human beings without alienation and without a feeling of superiority or inferiority, and just appreciating that everybody has gifts from God, and we're here to develop them. Another thing, he talks about another theme right here. He says, all that is created, however, it is preceded by a cause. If you go study philosophy someday, you'll find out that philosophers talk about this. Everything has a cause. And this is the origin of science. Because when we find out what causes something to happen, then we start to really understand what that thing is and how it works. But it doesn't stop there, because he says this fact in itself establisheth beyond the shadow of a doubt the unity of the Creator. So this is a proof of the unity of God, that everything that's created was preceded by a cause. And by the way, he's not going to write a book about this. That's it. You have to think about it. You have to meditate on it. You have to live with it. And eventually, it's like a garden of blossoms. They all open and you go, oh, that's what he means. But you can't make that happen. It only happens when you're ready for it. And that's not just true of you and me, it's true of any human being. So he asked also about the celestial spheres. So what are the celestial spheres? He's talking about all those things you see in the sky. There are planets out there, and there are galaxies, and there, and the science of astronomy has now been developed so much in the past 150 years that we know a whole lot more than people in Baha'u'llah's time knew. But we still have a lot to learn, a lot more to learn. And here he talks about this, and he says, "Know thou that every fixed star hath its own planets, and every planet its own creatures, whose number no man can compute." We thought the planet Earth was unique, had been created by God, and that it was unlike any other planet, unlike that our sun was unlike any other sun. But Baha'u'llah says that's not the case. That's not the case. Out there are all these stars, billions of stars. They all have planets and they all have creatures. And you can't possibly number all the creatures. In other words, our capacity to have a full grasp of even the physical creation is extremely limited. I read something the other day that I thought was fascinating. It was that scientists estimate that we know about the sea, the creatures that live in the sea, in 5% of the sea on planet Earth. So it just puts things into perspective. Only 5% has actually been carefully studied. And that careful study, if you're interested in that sort of thing, it's almost every day there's some new discovery that's been made. But 95% of the ocean is still unexplored. We don't know the first thing about it. I think this is tremendously exciting and also tremendously a confirmation of our certainty in the existence of God and the existence of the worlds of God, because it just shows us how little we know and how vast the creation of God is. This is I wanted to explain something in here. There's some wording here that could be confusing. We have formerly uttered these words: "This is not the day for any man to question his Lord. It behooveth whosoever hath hearkened to the call of God, as voiced by him who is the dayspring of glory, to arise and cry out, Here I am, here am I, O Lord of all names, here am I, O Maker of the heavens." What's he talking about? He's talking about the Bab. The Bab, in the Persian Bayan and other writings, forbade his followers from questioning his successor without his successor's permission. Why would he do that? He would do that because basically he knew that a lot of his followers were not sincere and they needed to be warned not to challenge his successor. His successor was called repeatedly him whom God shall make manifest. And of course, Baha'u'llah is him whom God shall make manifest. How do we know that? Because Baha'u'llah tells us that he's the promised one, and because he presents so many proofs of the fact that he is the one actually promised by the Bab. I've written an entire book about that. It's about 300, 400 pages long. It's called Proofs of the Prophets, the Case of Baha'u'llah. If you want some really heavy reading someday, can't imagine why, but if you do, the book is up online and I can point you in the right direction. And it's really fascinating to see how Baha'u'llah, how thorough he is in documenting the fact that he is the fulfillment of the prophecies of the Bab. There's no question about it. It's absolutely clear. But see, this was one of the ways in which the Bab was trying to protect Baha'u'llah from being pestered by people who didn't trust him, who said, well, I don't think you're the right guy. I think somebody else is the person who's predicted by the Bab, or maybe we're going to have to wait 1,500 years or 2,000 years before somebody's going to come around. He was trying to prepare them by saying, don't ask questions of him, leave him alone. But Baha'u'llah actually reversed this by saying, it's okay. It's okay to ask any question you want, including this person who has asked him. Now, that comes to the conclusion of the excerpts that were selected for this week. And the next collection, let me go back up so that you can see it. I'm going to, let me look at this. It's going to be found here. You see number 9? That will be the next one. And that will go through 83 to 92. 83 to 92. And my notes on those readings will go out in the next couple of days and they'll be in 2 forms. Some of you are having a great time using the course functionality. You're able to read in it. You're able to see the notes in it. And for you, you'll be able to click on the notes in the text and read them. For those of you who are not finding it easy to get into the app and you don't maybe even want to be bothered and you'd rather just read your physical copy of Gleanings, that's fine. If you want to look at the notes that I've come up with for this selection, those will be posted to the Clearwater website. And I will be also be sending them in through the announcement feature in the course. So if you're registered for the course, then you'll receive that announcement. And if you don't get it and you don't see it on Clearwater anytime in the next 2 days, then I want you to feel free to call me. I mean, not call me. What do I mean? Don't call me, because if you call me, you might be calling from some other time zone and you probably won't reach me. But email me, because I can get my email at some point during the day and respond. Then I can send you your own copy. Okay? So does anybody have any questions or any comments?
Yes, actually. Hi, Peter.
Hi, Mitchell.
My question. I know it's in the first part of section 8. But who was Baha'u'llah talking about when he said the evil one? Because I forget what paragraph that was. I know it was in the first part of 8.
All right. When Baha'u'llah talks about the evil one, he's talking about 2 things depending on the context. One context are the people who have rejected the manifestations, who become the kind of the essence of negativity, what the Bab used to call, he talked about affirmation, the people who affirm the reality of the manifestation, and then there are people who reject it. Well, the people who reject it the old terminology for that was they were called devils or demons or Satan. That's how they were referred to in the Old Testament, the New Testament, also in the Quran. Baha'u'llah's, so he uses that vocabulary sometimes because people are familiar with it. Okay, so that's one meaning, is that people who are going to steer you in the wrong direction. So watch out, because it's a reality. Being around other human beings, we are vulnerable to picking up whatever they have. And when people are really negative and we spend a lot of time around them, you got to really watch it, because you can pick up that negativity and become like them. And all through the hidden words, Baha'u'llah is advising us to be very careful who we associate with. And that's not to say that we don't associate widely with lots of people, just to become close friends with people who are negative, because they will affect you. There's a wonderful story about Gandhi. Gandhi had this close friend who was a Muslim when he was young. And I mean, a bosom buddy, somebody he shared everything with. And then he found out that this close connection with the Muslim was leading him to stop eating the food that is required by a Hindu who is following their religion. In other words, he stopped being a vegetarian. He started eating meat. And he realized, I'm sacrificing my spiritual path to keep a friendship going. No, that's wrong. I've got to stop doing that. See, and that gives you an indication that people who are going to lead you astray, you've got to watch out and not let them lead you. So that's one thing. Another thing is that the evil one is inside of every single one of us, because whenever we follow the animal nature in the human being instead of the spiritual nature, we run into problems. Every single time. You think about in your diet, if you eat the things that are good to keep your body healthy for the time you're on planet of Earth, you're fine. But when you start doing things like following your appetites, you are in big trouble. Let me tell you, I'm 72 and I've had a battle with diabetes. It's because I ate sugar. I've cut out sugar. I'm fine. I'm doing well. I'm taking some kind of medicine for other things too. But I wouldn't have the ailments that I have at my age if I'd been obedient to my soul, because my soul knew what was good. And Baha'u'llah tells you how to eat, by the way. It's very good. He tells you how to eat, and he tells you how to deal with all kinds of things, like sleep, like bathing, being clean, and wearing clean garments, all sorts of very practical things. And if we do them, it's good for us. And if we don't do them, we'll run into problems. And that's just talking about physical things, because really the most important things here are the spiritual ones. No? And every time our anger overwhelms us, we have to watch it, because that's the evil one. That's the evil one inside of you. There's sometime I'll post this. There's a description of what the evil one is in the Gospels. Jesus explains this, because people were complaining to Jesus. The Pharisees were complaining, why are you telling people to wash their hands? I mean, not to wash their hands. Why are you telling them that they can eat, they can go pick food on the Sabbath? And he said, you don't understand the first thing about where evil comes from. It doesn't come from the outside. It comes from the inside. It says that it's from the inside that we have all of those feelings of wanting to control, wanting to manipulate, wanting to mislead, wanting to get what we want. That's all the evil one, and it's all inside of us. So we have to conquer that. We conquer that through prayer and meditation and reading the writings and all the other spiritual exercises that God gives us through the manifestation. Because when you go to the next world, that material nature, that animal nature doesn't serve any purpose at all. And so you got to develop this other nature. The writings talk about this all over the place. We have two natures. One nature is for this world, and the other nature is for the next world. And we have to really work on the one for the next world, because that's where we're going to spend eternity. We're only here for a short time, right? And so it's important that we understand that references to the evil one are never to the mythological character that has horns and red skin and leads people astray in a metaphysical way. That demon doesn't exist. It's a big fat lie. What is real is for us to take responsibility for our own demons, because they are real and they mess our lives up all the time. I've
Okay.
got a question from Becky.
Yes, Peter, I wonder, I've always wondered when I read the passages concerning the nature of the soul. And in section 81, he talks about the soul progressing until it attaineth the presence of God. I wondered if you would talk about your understanding of what that means, because I read that and I think, but we can never reach God. I would just like to hear your thoughts on that.
Absolutely. Okay, this is beautifully explained by Baha'u'llah in two places, Kitab Yagan and Epistle to the Son of the Wolf. You can go and do a word search on presence of God and find it in both locations. What Baha'u'llah explains is that all the references to the presence of God and being in the presence of God is a reference to being in the presence of the manifestation of God. Every single one of them. And that is a promise that is found throughout the scriptures. It says that people are going to get to be with God if they purify themselves and they attain to this certain capacity to be aware of and to appreciate his existence. They're not talking about the unknowable essence of God. That is unknowable even to the manifestation. So it's always speaking of having the presence of the manifestation of God, which is the closest we ever come to God. And if that sounds strange, it's because there have been so many confusing concepts that have been taught to people in the name of religion, including that we're going to have a direct relationship with God, the creator. It's a ridiculous idea, really, when you think of it. I mean, you know, we can't cope with that sort of intensity. We can't even cope with seeing the divine nature of the manifestation. Do you remember that story of Jesus when he's up on the mountain and he's up there with two of his chief disciples and they can't stay awake and they keep drowsing off? He says, keep company with me. And they see this vision of Jesus and Jesus, and they also see Moses, and they see Elijah. And so they come up with this explanation for what's going on. And he says, no, that's not what it is. Because we're limited human beings and we see things the way we see them. There's a really intense situation where Jesus is explaining he's going to be martyred. He's going to be put on the cross and he's going to die. And Peter gets absolutely incensed with him. And he says, no, don't say that. That can't happen. And what does Jesus say to him? He says, get thee behind me, Satan. Now, why does he say that? Because at that moment, Peter is channeling this animal nature that doesn't want Jesus to suffer and die. And he's not understanding that Jesus is eternal. He's never dying. Okay? And if you follow him, you will never die too. So the spiritual meaning here is really what we see. So that's how we need to understand the presence of God. It's not that we're going to actually become united with God. There are all kinds of nutty ideas of that in the world, that we're all going to become God together. No, the Baha'i writings are super clear about we never become God and God never becomes us. The Guardian in the Dispensation of Baha'u'llah explains the doctrine of the incarnation is not only illogical, it's impossible. There is no God who could incarnate himself and create the absolutely incredible universe of universes that we see out there. Not possible. That's us trying to put God into a human box. We've been doing that from the day one. We want to define God for ourselves. That's the God we're comfortable with. You know,
Thank
we
you,
even
Peter.
call him my God. He's not my God. I'm his creation. That's the reality. Molly.
Yes. Um, the unity of the manifestations in the next world, and they abide in the same throne, as mentioned. And the manifestations are there in the next world to help us, to educate us, to make us progress. So we have to think of the manifestations as our creator, as our educators, for souls to progress.
Yes. Yes.
We
And
never-
also,
yeah.
the manifestations are all united, and they're also, their other part of their reality is they are hierarchical. There's a hierarchy. Baha'u'llah is the supreme manifestation, the inaugurator of a new cycle. And in his writings, he talks about none of the prophets of God have seen the future that he's revealing. None of them. They didn't need to see it because they couldn't reveal it to humanity beyond the few cryptic phrases where they're predicting about what's going to happen. And you know those passages, they're talking about, things like people appearing in clouds and the rocks splitting and earthquakes happening and all kinds of stuff like that. Well, that was human language. That was the only way that we could have any understanding of what was going to happen. But it doesn't actually happen that way. It's, for thousands of years, people have been saying, oh, there are earthquakes. That must mean God's coming now. But that wasn't the intention. Tamara.
Hi. Oh, okay,
Hi.
yeah. I wanted to go back to that topic about the presence of God. It's reminding me of a Christian song. Oh, I want to see him, look him in his face, right? And so you were saying that the presence of God is always the manifestation of God, and I was reflecting on that song and what you were saying, and I was just asking if we have any passages that give us some understanding of what that looks like in the next life, being in the presence of the manifestation.
Well, Baha'u'llah speaks about this, and he says we actually will have an association with him. And we also will have an association with Jesus. Jesus said that. He said, I'm going away and you're going to see me later on. And people like not believing him, or they thought he's going to come back to earth. Well, he did. In a sense, he came back to earth, but then he went to heaven and he's going to be seeing you in heaven. Why should he keep coming back here? That's not his aim. He's trying to prepare us to go there. That's the whole point of them coming here. Is so we're ready to go there. It's like, and so this idea that we have that this idea that we're somehow going to miss out on the most wonderful experience that the human being can have, which is to be in the presence of our Creator. No, we're not going to miss out at all. We're promised in probably infinite number of passages of Scripture that we're going to experience that. But what is that experience like? Baha'u'llah says the mysteries of the life to come have not been divulged and will not be. He says that in the next to last passage. Mm-hmm. We're not learning about it here. And he tells us why. It's really, really beautiful to read this passage. It's the next to last passage in the Gleanings. And he says, my paraphrase, the reason why we don't get to know those mysteries is because if we knew them, we wouldn't want to live anymore. That's it. Now, and as long as we're living here, we need to want to live here. We have work to do here. We've got stuff we need to be doing, and it makes all the sense in the world that if we knew what's coming next, there'd be mass suicide. And indeed, look at what's happening in the world. Look at those people who are sure that they're going to go to paradise if they go out and kill people in the name of God. And they're sacrificing their lives. They die believing that by dying, they're going to go to the next world and be with God. And Baha'u'llah is very clear about that. Don't you be killing yourself or other people thinking that's going to get you closer to God. No. What gets you closer to God is walking with him humbly and doing his will. That's what gets us close to God. And letting the next world be the next world. It's going to come. It's going to come, and we're going to, I'll probably get there before you do. Probably a whole lot sooner. I'm 72. I'll be lucky if I last 10 years.
God only knows.
Although I've got two little girls who want me to last until, I don't know, forever probably, but it's okay. By the time I go, I hope that they will have an understanding that it's not going to be long before they're going to join me, because this life is so quick. It really doesn't feel quick when we're of a certain age. I understand, but as we get older, God is very merciful to us and he makes time pass more quickly, and we go, what? Like I look at myself in the mirror, I say, "You 72? You got to be kidding!" How many of us who have passed a certain age, we just do not recognize how did that happen? Because it seems like it happened so quickly. You know, whereas I think when you're younger, like the days seem to last forever. You know, um, I think that's a merciful gift of God for our experience. But anyway, yeah, those songs, all those songs that you're thinking of that we sing in church, they're increasing our love for who? For Jesus, because that's who you're going to see. It doesn't say you're going to see God the Father. Because Jesus said over and over in the Gospels, he said, there is no way to come to the Father except through the Son. You're not getting there except through the manifestation. That's it. This is your conduit. This is your connection. And only the Son knows the Father. That's what he says in the Gospel of John. Only the Son knows the Father. And Baha'u'llah says exactly the same thing. We should have trust in him because he can disclose what the true nature of God is according to our capacity. And we shouldn't be wishing that we had a direct connection with God because like it says in the Old Testament, when the people tried to have a direct connection with God, it was too much.
Mhm.
I mean, even a direct connection. Do you remember where on Mount Tabor, this is where they think it happened, where Jesus has this experience where he meets with Elijah and Moses,
The
and then God
transfiguration
speaks
on
to
the
him.
mount.
It's on the transfiguration, exactly. When the transfiguration, they couldn't even bear to look at him. They were just, and it was because he was giving them a glimpse of his spiritual nature. I'll give you a story. There's a man named Mirza Haydar Ali, who is a very beloved follower of Baha'u'llah, spent his last years in Carmel on the mountain in close proximity with Baha'u'llah because Baha'u'llah loved him so much. But he spent years prior to that teaching the faith in various countries and then getting thrown in jail, of course, because that's what happened back in those days. If you teach the faith, you're going to jail. Okay. Right. And that's if you're lucky, because otherwise they torture you and kill you. Okay. And so Mirza Haydar Ali wrote his reminiscences. Why can't I speak English today? Reminiscences. There we go. All right. He wrote them, and it's called Stories from the Delight of Hearts. It was translated by Hand of the Cause, Mr. Faizi. It's a beautiful book. I mean, it's a moving book. And it's published, I think, by Kalimat Press. Look for it. Stories from the Delight of Hearts. And he asked Baha'u'llah one day, says, Baha'u'llah, will you show me your divine nature? And then and then Baha'u'llah says, yes. Yes, he will. And then he says, Mirza Haydar Ali says, and then he did. And I can't talk about it. You can't talk about it. Okay. Well, of course you can't talk about it. He's showing a little glimpse of his glory to you personally. It's not meant to be talked about. But that's a little taste of what you can experience in the next world if you love him, truly love him. Because if you love, that's one of the hidden words that says, love me that I may love you. If thou lovest me not, thou canst not come to my love. You can't feel the love of God unless you feel love for God. Jesus said the same thing. Jesus said, you have to actually love God, and you have to love the Son of God, and you have to love your fellow believers too. Don't think that you can go around and say that you believe and you don't love. That feeling of that real emotional connection is absolutely indispensable. Paul says, he says, love is the most important gift from God. There are all these other gifts he enumerates, and then he says the most important one of all is what he calls caritas, which in the Latin language means that love that's universal, that love of God. Yeah, so I'll tell you, I love to go. I haven't done this for quite a while, but I love to go to a real gospel celebrating church. I love that. And it's because those people feel it, and they make you feel it by the way they sing and the way their souls radiate through their bodies when they're together praising God. It's really powerful stuff. I love it. Absolutely love it. And, someday we're going to have all those people who are in love with manifestations. They're going to all join the Baha'i faith, and we're all going to get it from them. I'm looking forward to that. So are there any more questions or comments from anybody, or do you want to go to bed now? Maybe Jeremiah has fallen
I
asleep. Have you fallen
no,
asleep, Jeremiah?
I think it is good time to go ahead and stop for the evening. So
Okay.
I'm
anyway,
sharing a
Okay,
video,
well,
if I
thank you all
may.
for coming today. What?
I just listening to you talking about praise. I'm sharing a song that I created. It's in the video in the chat. So
Oh, good. Thank you. Can you see that? Jeremiah, can you see that?
yeah, it's there. So everyone who
Okay, well,
would like to, they can look at the chat and take a look at
okay.
it
So
later.
if you can copy that link and send it to me, because I can't see it right now because I'm already in this application. I'd love to see it. Um, and for anybody who's coming as a newcomer, um, let me give you my email address. It's Terry, Terry 19 at gmail.com. Okay. Thank you all for coming. Look forward to seeing you next time you're free. And lesson 9 notes will be coming in the next couple of days.